On Sunday, 97 people in China died from the coronavirus. That's the highest number in a single day since this crisis began. We know the death toll as a whole is now over 900. Across China, more than 40,000 people are infected and over 180,000 are under medical observation. The only better news is that the number of newly infected people per day has stabilised. Well, here's President Xi in Beijing at a prevention and control centre. You can see him having his temperature checked, like many people have done. The president says he's working to prevent large-scale job losses because of this virus, but that looks harder to avoid as each day goes by. Let's bring in Kerry Allen, Chinese specialist with BBC Monitoring. Kerry, thanks for joining us. Tell us more about President Xi's visit and what he's been saying today.
Well, this was a really striking footage just in general anyway, given that, I mean, we were talking about this coronavirus story back in January and then during Spring Festival, it was very apparent that Xi Jinping was very much not in the public eye. Very quickly, he appointed Li Keqiang, his deputy, to be the kind of the face of handling the coronavirus, and he visited Wuhan, visited various hospitals, but people haven't really seen Xi Jinping. I mean, even on newspapers like People's Daily, the big official newspaper, you'd expect him to see him every day on the front cover, but very much since this coronavirus story started becoming the story, he's not been anywhere, and there has been speculation that he's not been in the public eye because people have wanted to criticise him. So he's very much, this footage today of him appearing, meeting people, being very friendly, wishing people well, talking to locals about the food they're selling. It's the first time that we've seen him being open and talking about the coronavirus in public.
Kerry, stay with us, please. A couple of other things to ask you about. Now, this virus was first detected in the city of Wuhan, and Wuhan's been in lockdown for weeks now. We have this graph from the Chinese authorities which show the number of deaths every day in China, and you can see those figures have been going up through the last few weeks. We also have this map which shows which parts of China have the highest number of cases. The darker the red, the higher the number, and you can see Wuhan and its province Hubei with the darkest red of all. And while all of this has been playing out, Chinese workers are meant to be celebrating their Lunar New Year. As you can see, it's not really happening in Beijing, but we know the break for the Lunar New Year was supposed to go to the end of January, but it was then pushed beyond that. It's now finished, but things are a long, long way from normal. Here's Robin Brent.
Well, here in Shanghai, the commercial capital, usually home to 24 million people, it was supposed to be the first day back. But I have to say, it was a trickle. The banks remain closed. Most of the shops remain closed. There's a small number of people out there. But there are clearly a lot of anxieties amongst people living here in Shanghai. And the numbers of those coming back is almost certainly going to be staggered as well.
Well, the BBC's Stephen McDonald has just finished a 2-week quarantine period after reporting from Hubei, and he's been sharing these pictures of deserted streets in Beijing. And as Robin was saying, despite the encouragement for people to go back to work, many people are obviously not turning out. We know factories and offices remain closed in a number of cases. Here are some residents in Beijing.
Our company has adopted some special measures, including sanitizing every day. The building is in isolation. We are required to wear masks the whole day while at work.
Actually, I still think it's a normal life. It's fine as long as we pay a little attention to it. For example, disinfection and being careful not to have close contact with people.
Well, let's bring in Kerry again from BBC Monitoring. Kerry, to what extent are employers allowing people just not to come to work?
Well, very much so. I mean, even the government has been telling people that even if people are going to work, they need to very much distance themselves, be at least a metre apart, not eat food together. So, and also one of the things we have to factor in is that schools haven't returned, children haven't returned to schools yet. So a lot of parents, for example, they physically can't actually get to work because they need childcare, and childcare centres like nurseries are closed as well. So parents are very much, companies are being sympathetic and recognising that until this virus dies down, it's probably better that people stay at home rather than businesses going back to work.
And President Xi has been talking about wanting to avoid job losses. Are we already at a stage where we can say those losses are beginning?
Well, I think there's a bit of leeway because of this virus. I mean, yes, there are jobs that are people are nervous and they're trying to get back to work. But at the same time, there have been people who, if they're trying to race back or they're trying to do things like this and put others at risk, they do risk short prison sentences for about 10 to 15 days. So yeah, as I say, there is some leeway on this. But yeah, basically people are just thinking, for the greater good at the moment. Companies, employers as well as employees, stay at home and just tide this out.
Kerry, thank you very much indeed. Well, we've also heard from the World Health Organization today. It says the fatality rate for this virus is about 2%. It's also expressed concern about how it's spreading outside of China. Here's its Director General in Geneva.
In recent days, we have seen some concerning instances of onward transmission from people with no travel history to China, like the cases reported in France yesterday and the United Kingdom today. The detection of this small number of cases could be the spark that becomes a bigger fire.
Well, the UK government has introduced new measures in England that mean those in quarantine can be forcibly sent into isolation if they pose a threat, and they also cannot leave without permission. The Press Association is reporting that this step's been taken after someone threatened to abscond from one of the 2 quarantine centres currently being operated. We also know there are cases of the virus in 24 countries now, 8 in the UK, 4 of which are connected to one businessman. We know he contracted the virus at a conference in Singapore. He then flew to a ski resort in France. There, the virus spread to 5 more people who remain in France. He then travelled to the UK, initially to Brighton on the south coast, but now he's being treated in isolation at a hospital in London. But a doctor's surgery in Brighton is also saying one of its staff has tested positive for the virus. And that story has led to the phrase super spreader being used a lot in the news today. That's when one patient infects significant numbers of people. You can find much more detail on how that works in this article on the BBC News website. It's really important to stress, though, it's not the patient's fault, as people who are showing no symptoms at all can inadvertently spread the virus. For example, we found this study from the Lancet Medical Journal focusing on 2003, when a coronavirus known as MERS was a big issue. That included a super spreading event that led to more than 80 people being infected by one person. Well, for more on how this virus appears to be spreading, here's the BBC's Michelle Roberts.
It appears that some people might be able to pass the virus more readily than others. We don't know why. So experts so far had thought possibly somebody who's infected might pass it to 2 or 3 other people. In this most recent example, it seems to be more than that. So hence the term super spreader, but it's not down to the individual. It's just how the virus behaves in different people. So it's very much we're learning how this virus is different for different people.
Next, we turn to Hong Kong and Japan, because passengers on cruise ships have been in the eye of the storm with this virus. In Hong Kong, passengers leaving one ship, and you can see them here, they were on board a vessel called the World Dream. It's been in isolation after some people on a previous cruise caught the virus. Well, they've now been allowed to disembark, and that was after the authorities in Hong Kong carried out tests on 1,800 people on board and gave them the all clear. It's a different story, though, in Yokohama, because there one cruise ship has had to be kept isolated, and another 65 cases have been confirmed among passengers. The ship's been quarantined since last week. Here you can see it pictured. It's called the Diamond Princess. There are 3,700 passengers on board, and they've been held in isolation for they're going to be held for at least 2 weeks. And that was after a passenger had disembarked at a previous stop and had tested positive. But unlike in Hong Kong, where everyone was tested, that's not happened in the case of this boat. We also wanted to highlight this laboratory in Wuhan, because it's now specialising in testing, trying to detect how this virus works and how it's spreading. The World Health Organization says being able to diagnose the disease effectively is crucial to being able to give people the all clear once they have been tested. Here's the WHO's Director General again.
WHO is working to equip laboratories with the capacity to rapidly diagnose cases. Without vital diagnostic capacity, countries are in the dark as to how far and wide the virus has spread.
Well, for more on the difficulties of testing for this virus on board a cruise ship, here's Dr. Jennifer Nuzzo from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
Well, I think one of the challenges with these cruise ships is you have everybody captured at a moment in time, and if it's possible that they have been exposed and are infected by the virus, then they may show signs of that virus over the next potentially up to 2 weeks. And so testing everyone at any moment in time is going to be difficult to know truly whether the person is infected or not. And I think this really speaks to one of the challenges of trying to detain these individuals and then decide whether or not they're safe to go or not, particularly if they are on the ship and then they're exposed to somebody who then later develops an infection. It sort of begs the question whether they have to start the clock over again for another 2 weeks and whether that will keep going in perpetuity depending on how many people ultimately develop the infection.